Definitely welcome back, Celine. A very long time indeed. So, Ashish, Shadow, Shujal, you guys might not know them, Anu and Celine, but they are the OG gang. They are here from the earliest day of our society. Anu, in a very nice manner, Anu is actually a part of the society now. She is in the council and she's one of the coordinators. Celine, you know Aisha. I hope you remember Aisha. Aisha is the other coordinator of Sahitya Kanam. So Anu and Aisha are the coordinators of the society, and it's really sweet because Ash met Anu. Yeah, you probably did. You probably did because we were roaming together. Shadow, you might have seen Anu, but you know her because of Saitika as well, right? So Shrujal, the people you are seeing here, they were the OGs, and guys, Shrujal is the latest addition to this midnight mass of ours. I feel old. Imagine how I feel. I'm so old that America might, invade my house, if you know what I mean. Fossils turning into fuel. But yeah, nevertheless, it's great to see familiar faces. And of course, the enthusiastic ones as well. आशीष मैं बहुत मारूंगा अगर ये वाला सेशन छोड़ के गए तो ठीक है. I'll make sure that you spend your whole life on a wheelchair and drinking food. Okay, drinking. You know what I mean. Okay. Oh, I am recording. Wow. Okay. Where did you all meet? Well, so basically, Shujal, Anu, and Celine, they joined the society. Like they are few of the earliest members of this society. So we are active for the last 4 years. So yeah, that is the thing. We met at campus for Paradox. So if everything goes well, we might meet you as well, right? If you get to come to the campus. Nevertheless, guys. So tonight's tale. Oh, that is so sweet of you, bro. Tonight's tale. Uh, वो पुराने दिन वही तो याद आते हैं जैसे अभिषेक उपमन्यु का है ना दोस्ती के ये पल. But nevertheless, Anu is being very nice, right? She's saying my voice acts like a lullaby, but it's actually the content that comes out of my mouth. So that is the thing. So yeah, enough self-deprecating jokes. Salem slot has ended. Okay, the vampires have overtaken that small backwood town in America. The master is dead. Our protagonists, Ben and Mark, well, not exactly the protagonists, but the surviving protagonists. Ben and Mark, they managed to escape this town and they come back a year later to burn it down, right? But then again, the there's a reason they are called undead. And just for a second before we start the story, guys, you can see that although the title of the story is one for the road, the file's name is Salem Slot. The reason is that this short story, titled One for the Road, is a one stop sequel to Salem Slot. Okay? And unlike Salem Slot, this is not a whole story, it is a short one. But before starting, I would just like to introduce one little thing. Okay? See, we all are students of this degree. We all have been students of some other organizations as well, time and again. And throughout our life, we have come across a lot of pop culture, a lot of literature, a lot of fiction, right? But there is something which is very, very, very timelessly constant, and that is the myth of a vampire. आज के दिन में in today's world, vampires have been glamorized, right? They wear leather jackets, they are good looking, they are enchanting, they are seductive. But would you feel the same about? Uh, oh, Berlin is here. Hello, Berlin. Thank you for joining, bro. So, speaking of vampires, Berlin has joined. And yeah, so Berlin, we were just about to start. And the thing is that uh, I just wanted to build up one thought that, you know, why we are attracted to this concept of a dead person coming back to quote unquote life and prowling the streets of small towns and, you know, mountains and hills and sucking the blood, the life force of the living being. There is something very mystical about this whole concept. And as I mentioned, that in today's day and age, vampires are, pervertly exploited as, fashion icons and everything. But that is not the case. They were apex predators, they were boogeymen, they were the things which made the villagers shut their windows down. Glowing skin, absolutely, I know. That was disastrous and preposterous at the same time. And every continent, every culture has its vampiric creature. In India, overall, we might have some regional variants of them, but we all have heard of Pishach, right? The word Pishach is actually uh, uh, describing a entity which sucks on human blood. ITM people who make questions are vampires. So didn't even- Indeed, cannot deny that. But the concept of a vampire is as old as time, and you know, truly sucks the life out. Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, the concept of a vampire is as old as time because if we go back through the dense collection of sands of time, we will see that the first human beings, the first gaggle of cavemen who gathered around the fire, you know, together, sitting there, not just for the warmth, but for the safety as well. Safety from what? Not just animals, but concepts, abstracts, things which were out in the dark. And these things have existed throughout centuries. Where have they existed? Well, they have existed in folklores and folk tales and old wives' stories. We know at least one person who would talk about these things, such monsters, with a lot of passion. Not because they are fashionable, but because they are primal, primeval, ancient, and mysterious. So everyone has, and every such person has a vampire story. They can have one from a novel or one from a secluded region in Romania, one from the Carpathian Mountains, and here tonight we have one for the road. Salem's Lot is down. The remaining vampires prowl the peripheral region at night. The people who drive at night, truck drivers and police cars, they have seen shambling figures trying to chase the cars. But there's nothing concrete about it. Salem Slot is a dead town, and this story takes place after a long period. And this doesn't take place in Salem Slot, but a town, a neighboring town, precisely. One for the Road by Stephen King. It was 10:15, and Herb Tooklander was thinking of closing for the night when the man in the fancy overcoat and the white, staring face burst into Tookie's bar, which lies in the northern part of Falmouth. It was the 10th of January, just about the time most folks are learning to live comfortably with all the New Year's resolutions they broke. And there was one hell of a northeaster blowing outside. 6 inches had come down before dark, and it had been going hard and heavy since then. Twice we had seen Billy Larrabee go by high in the cab of the town plough, and the second time Tukey ran him out a beer. An act of pure charity, my mother would have called it, and my God, she put down enough of Tukey's beer in a time. Billy told him they were keeping ahead of it on the main road, but the side ones were closed and apt to stay that way until next morning. The radio in Portland was forecasting another foot and a 40-mile-an-hour wind to pile up the drifts. There was just Tukey and me in the bar, listening to the wind howl around the eaves and watching it dance the fire around the hearth. I have one for the road, Booth, Tukey says. I'm gonna shut her down. He poured me one and himself one, and that's when the door cracked open and the stranger staggered in, snow up to his shoulders and in his hair, like he had rolled around in confectioner's sugar. The wind billowed, and a sand fine sheet of snow in after him. Close the door! Tukey roars at him. Was you born in a barn? I have never seen a man who looked that scared. He was like a horse that spent an afternoon eating fire nettles. His eyes rolled toward Tukey and he said, My wife, my daughter. And he collapsed on the floor in a dead faint. Holy Joe, Tukey says. Close the door, Booth, would you? I went and shut it, and pushing it against the wind was something of a chore. Tukey was down on one knee, holding the fellow's head up and patting his cheeks. I got over to him and saw right off that it was nasty. His face was fiery red, but there were grey blotches here and there. And when you have lived through winters in Maine since the time Woodrow Wilson was president, as I have, you know, those grey blotches meant frostbite. Fainted, Tukey said. Get the brandy off the back bar, will you? I got it and came back. Tukey had opened the fellow's coat. He had come around a little. His eyes were half open and he was muttering something too low to catch. Pour a cap, fool, Tukey says. Just a cap? I asked him. That stuff's dynamite, Tukey says. No sense overloading his carb. I poured out a capful and looked at Tukey. He nodded. Straight down the hatch. I poured it down. It was a remarkable thing to watch. The man trembled all over and began to cough. His face got redder. His eyelids, which had been at half mast, flew up like window shades. I was a bit alarmed, but Tukey only sat him up like a big baby and clapped him on the back. The man started to retch, and Tukey clapped him again. Hold on to it, he says. That brandy comes dear. The man coughed some more, but it was diminishing now. I got my first good look at him. City fellow, all right, and from somewhere south of Boston, at a guess. He was wearing kid gloves, Expensive, but thin. There were probably some more of those grayish white patches on his hands, and he would be lucky not to lose a finger or two. His coat was fancy, all right. A $300 job, if ever I had seen one. He was wearing tiny little boots and hardly came up over his ankles, and I began to wonder about his toes. Better, he said. All right, Tuki said. Can you come over to the fire? My wife and my daughter, he said. They're out there in the storm. From the way you came in, I didn't figure they were at home watching the TV, Tuki said. You can tell us by the fire as easy as here on the floor. Hook on, Booth. He got to his feet, but a little groan came out of him, and his mouth twisted down in pain. I wondered about his toes again, and I wondered why God felt he had to make fools from New York City who would try driving around in southern Maine at the height of a northeast blizzard. And I wondered if his wife and his little girl were dressed any warmer than him. We hiked him across to the fireplace and got him sat down in a rocker that used to be Mrs. Tukey's favorite until she passed on in 74. It was Mrs. Tukey that was responsible for most of the place, which had been written up in Down East and the Sunday Telegram and even once in the Sunday supplement of the Boston Globe. It's really more of a public house than a bar, with its big wooden floor pegged together rather than nailed, the maple bar, the old barn rafted ceiling, and the monstrous big fieldstone hearth. Mrs. Tukey started to get some ideas in her head after the Down East article came out. Wanted to start calling the place Tukey's Inn or Tukey's Rest, and I admit it has sort of a colonial ring to it, but I prefer plain old Tukey's Bar. It's one thing to get uppish in the summer when the state's full of tourists. Another thing altogether in the winter when you and your neighbors have to trade together. And there had been plenty of winter nights like this one that Tuki and I had spent all alone together, drinking scotch and water or just a few beers. My own Victoria passed on in 73, and Tuki's was a place to go where there were enough voices to mute the steady ticking of the death watch beetle. Even if there was just Tuki and me, it was enough. I wouldn't have felt the same about it if the place had been Tuki's Rest. It is crazy, but it is true. We got this fellow in front of the fire, and he got the shakes harder than ever. He hugged onto his knees, and his teeth clattered together, and a few drops of clear mucus spilled off the end of his nose. I think he was starting to realize that another 15 minutes out there might have been enough to kill him. It's not the snow, it's the wind chill factor that steals your heart. Where did you go off the road? Tuki asked him. 6 miles south of here, he said. Tuki and I stared at each other, and all of a sudden, I felt cold. Cold all over. You sure? Tuki demanded. You came 6 miles through the snow. He nodded. I checked the odometer when we came through town. I was following directions, going to see my wife's sister in Cumberland. Never been there before. We are from New Jersey. New Jersey. If there's anyone more purely foolish than a New Yorker. It's a fellow from New Jersey. 6 miles, you're sure? Tuki demanded. Pretty sure, yeah. I found the turnoff, but it was drifted in and it was. Tuki grabbed him. In the shifting glow of the fire, his face looked pale and strained, older than his 66 years by 10. You made a right turn. Right turn, yeah. My wife. Did you see a sign? Sign? He looked up at Tuki blankly and wiped the end of his nose. Of course I did. It was on my instructions. Take Joyner Avenue through Jerusalem's lot to the 295 entrance ramp. He looked from Tuki to me and back to Tuki again. Outside the wind. Outside, the wind whistled and howled and moaned through the eaves. Wasn't that right, mister? The lot, Tuki said, almost too soft to hear. Oh my god. What's wrong? The man said. His voice was rising. Wasn't that right? I mean, the road looked drifted in, but I thought if there's a town there, the plows will be out and then I. He just sort of tailed off. Booth? Tuki said to me, low, get on the phone. Call the sheriff. Sure. This fool from New Jersey says, that's right. What's wrong with you guys anyway? You look like you saw a ghost. Tuki said, no ghosts in the lot, mister. Did you tell them to stay in the car? Sure I did, he said, sounding injured. I'm not crazy. Well, you couldn't have proved it by me. What's your name? I asked him. For the sheriff. Lumley, he says. Gerard Lumley. He started in with Tuki again, and I went across to the telephone. I picked it up and heard nothing but dead silence. I hit the cut-off buttons a couple of times, still nothing. I came back. Tuki had poured Gerard Lumley another tot of brandy, and this one was going down him a lot smoother. Was he out? Tuki asked. Phone's dead. Oh, damn. Tuki says, and we look at each other. Outside, the wind gusted up, throwing snow against the windows. Lumley looked from Tuki to me and back again. Well, haven't either of you got a car? He asked. The anxiety was back in his voice. They've got to run the engine to run the heater. I only had about a quarter of a tank gas, and it took me an hour and a half to. Look, will you answer me? He stood up and grabbed Tuki's shirt. Mister, Tuki says, I think your hand just ran away from your brains. There. Lumley looked at his hand, at Tuki, then dropped it. Maine, he hissed. He made it sound like a dirty word about someone's mother. All right, he said. Where's the nearest gas station? They must have a tow truck. Nearest gas station is in Falmouth Center, I said. That's 3 miles down the road from here. Thanks, he said, a bit sarcastic, and headed for the door, buttoning his coat. Oh, won't be open though, I added. He turned back slowly and looked at us. What are you talking about, old man? He's trying to tell you that the station in the center belongs to Billy Larrabee, and Billy's out driving the plow, you damn fool, Tuki says patiently. Now, why don't you come back here and sit down before you bust a gut? He came back, looking dazed and frightened. Are you telling me you can't, that there isn't? I ain't telling you nothing, Tuki says. You are doing all the telling, and if you stopped for a minute, we could think this over. What's this town? Jerusalem's a lot? He asked. Why was the road drifted in? And no lights on anywhere? I said, Jerusalem's lot burned out 3 years back. And they never rebuilt? He looked like he didn't believe it. It appears that way, I said and looked at Tuki. What are we going to do about this? Can't leave them out there, he said. I got closer to him. Lumley had wandered away to look out the window in the snowy night. What if they have been got at? I asked. That may be, he said, but we don't know it for sure. I've got my Bible on the shelf. You still wear your Pope's medal? I pulled the crucifix out of my shirt and showed him. I was born and raised congregational, but most folks who live around the lot wear something. Crucifix, Saint Christopher's medal, rosary, something. Because 2 years ago, in the span of one dark October month, the lot went bad. Sometimes late at night, when there were just a few regulars drawn up around Tuki's fire, people would talk it over. Talk around it is more like the truth. You see, people in the lot started to disappear. First a few, then a few more, then a whole slew. The schools closed. The town stood empty for almost a year. Oh, a few people moved in, mostly damn fools from out of the state, like this fine specimen here, drawn by the low property values, I suppose. But they didn't last. A lot of them moved out a month or two after they had moved in. Well, the others, well, they disappeared. Then the town burned flat. It was at the end of a long dry fall. They figure it started up by the Marston house on the hill that overlooked Jointner Avenue. But no one knows how it started. Not to this day. It burned out of control for 3 days. After that, for a time, things were better. And then they started again. I only heard the word vampires mentioned once. A crazy pulp truck driver named Richie Messina from over Freeport Way was in Tukey's that night. Pretty well liquored up. Jesus Christ. The stampeder roars, standing up about 9 feet tall in his wool pants and his plaid shirt and his leather topped boots. Are you all so damn afraid to say it out? Vampires! That is what you're all thinking, ain't it? Jesus jumped up Christ in a chariot driven sidecar, just like a bunch of kids scared of the movies. You know what there is down there in Salem's lot. Want me to tell you? Want me to tell you? Do tell, Richie, Tuki says. It had got real quiet in the bar. You could hear the fire popping, and outside the soft drift of November rain coming down in the dark. You got the floor. What you got over there is your basic wild dog pack, Richie Messina tells us. That's what you got. That and a lot of old women who love a good spooky story. Why, for $80, I'd go up there and spend the night in what is left of that haunted house you are all so worried about. Well, what about it? Anyone want to put it up? But nobody would. Richie was a loudmouth and a mean drunk, and no one was going to shed any tears at his wake. But none of us were willing to see him go into Salem's lot after dark. Be screwed to the bunch of you, Richie says. I got my foot in the trunk of my Chevy, and that will stop anything in Falmouth, Cumberland, or Jerusalem slot. And that's where I'm going. He slammed out of the bar, and no one said a word for a while. Then Lament Henry says, real quiet, that's the last time anyone's gonna see Richie Messina. Holy God. And Lamont, raised to be a Methodist from his mother's knee, crossed himself. He'll sober off and change his mind, Tukey said, but he sounded uneasy. He'll be back by closing time, making out it was all a joke. But Lamont had the right of that one, because no one ever saw Richie again. His wife told the state cops she thought he had gone to Florida to beat a collection agency, but you could see the truth of the things in her eyes. Sick, scared eyes. Not long after, she moved away to Rhode Island. Maybe she thought Richie was going to come after her some dark night. And I'm not the man to say he might not have done. Now Tuki was looking at me, and I was looking at Tuki as I stuffed my crucifix back into my shirt. Never felt so old or so scared in my life. Tuki said again, we can't just leave them out there, Booth. Yeah, I know. We looked at each other for a moment longer. Then he reached out and gripped my shoulder. You're a good man, Booth. That was enough to buck me up some. It seems like when you pass 70, people start forgetting that you are a man, or that you ever were. Tookie walked over to Lumley and said, I've got a four-wheel drive Scout. I'll get it out. For God's sake, man, why didn't you say so before? He had whirled around from the window and was staring angrily at Tookie. Why do you why do you have to spend 10 minutes beating around the bush? Tookie said very softly, Mister, you shut your jaw. And if you get the urge to open it, you remember who made that turn onto an unplowed road in the middle of goddamn blizzard. He started to say something and then shut his mouth. Thick color had risen up in his cheeks. Tookie went out to get his Scout out of the garage. I felt around under the bar for his chrome flask and filled it full of brandy. Figured we might need it before this night was over. Maine blizzard. Ever been out in one? The snow comes flying so thick and fine that it looks like sand and sounds like that, beating on the sides of your car or pickup. You don't want to use your high beams because they reflect off the snow and you can't see 10 feet in front of you. With the low beams on, you can see maybe 15 feet. But I can live with the snow. It's the wind I don't like. When it picks up and begins to howl, driving the snow into 100 weird flying shapes and sounding like all the hate and pain and fear in the world. There's death in the throat of a snowstorm wind. White death. And maybe something beyond death. That is no sound to hear when you're tucked up all cozy in your bed with the shutters bolted and the doors locked. It's that much worse if you're driving. And we were driving smack into Salem's lot. Hurry up a little, can't you? Lumley asked. I said, for a man who came in half frozen, you're in one hell of a hurry to end up walking again. He gave me a resentful, baffled look and didn't say anything else. We were moving up the highway at a steady 25 miles an hour. It was hard to believe that Billy Larrabee had just plowed this stretch an hour ago. Another 2 inches had covered it and it was drifting in. The strongest gusts of wind rocked the Scout on her springs. The headlights showed a swirling white nothing up ahead of us. We hadn't met a single car. About 10 minutes later, Lumley gasps, "Hey, what's that?" He was pointing out my side of the car. I had been looking dead ahead. I turned, but was a shade too late. I thought I could see some sort of slumped form fading back from the car back into the snow, but that could have been imagination. What was it? A deer? I asked. I guess so, he says, sounding shaky. But its eyes, they looked red. He looked at me. Is that how a deer's eyes look at night? He sounded almost as if he were pleading. They can look like anything, I say, thinking that might be true. But I have seen a lot of deer at night from a lot of cars and never saw any set of eyes reflect back red. Tuki didn't say anything. About 15 minutes later, we came to a place where the snowbank on the right of the road wasn't so high because the plows are supposed to raise their blades a little when they go through an intersection. This looks like where we turned, Lumley said, not sounding too sure about it. I don't see the sign. This is it, Tuki answered. He didn't sound like himself at all. You can just see the top of the signpost. Oh, sure. Lumley sounded relieved. Listen, Mr. Toklander, I'm sorry about being so short back there. I was cold and worried about and calling myself 200 kinds of fool, and I want to thank you both. Don't thank Booth and me until we have got them in this car, Tuki said. He put the Scout in four-wheel drive and slammed his way through the snowbank and onto Jointner Avenue, which goes through the lot and out to 295. Snow flew up from the mudguards. The rear end tried to brake a little bit, but Tuki has been driving through snow since Hector was a pup. He jockeyed it a little bit, talked to it, and on we went. The headlights picked out the bare indication of other tire tracks from time to time, the ones made by Lumley's car, and then they would disappear again. Lumley was leaning forward looking for his car, and all at once Tuki said, "Mr. Lumley?" "What?" He looked around at Tuki. "People around these parts are kind of superstitious about Salem's Lot," Tuki says, sounding easy enough, but I could see the deep lines of strain around his mouth, and the way his eyes kept moving from side to side. If your people are in the car, why, that is fine, but we'll pack them up, go back to my place, and tomorrow, when the storm's over, Billy will be glad to yank your car out of the snowbank. But if they're not in the car, not in the car? Lumley broke in sharply. Why wouldn't they be in the car? If they are not in the car, Tuki goes on, not answering. We are going to turn around and drive back to Falmouth Center and whistle for the sheriff. Makes no sense to go wallowing around at night in a snowstorm anyway, does it? They'll be in the car. Why else would they be? Where else would they be? I said. One other thing, Mr. Lumley. If we should see anybody, we are not going to talk to them. Not even if they talk to us. You understand that? Very slow, Lumley says. Just what are these superstitions? Before I could say anything, God alone knows what I would have said. Tuki broke in. We're there. We were coming up on the back end of a big Mercedes. The whole hood of the thing was buried in a snowdrift, and another drift had soaked in the whole left side of the car. But the tail lights were on, and we could see exhaust drifting out of the tailpipe. They didn't run out of gas anyway, Lumley said. Tuki pulled up and pulled on the scout's emergency brake. You remember what Booth told you, Lumley? Sure, sure. But he wasn't thinking of anything but his wife and daughter. I don't see how anybody could blame him either. Ready, Booth? Tuki asked me. His eyes held on mine, grim and grey, in the dashboard lights. I guess I am, I said. We all got out and the wind grabbed us, throwing snow in our faces. Lumley was first, bending into the wind, his fancy topcoat billowing out behind him like a sail. He cast two shadows, one from Tuki's headlights, the other from his own taillights. I was behind him, and Tuki was a step behind me. When I got to the trunk of the Mercedes, Tuki grabbed me. Let him go, he said. Janie? Francie? Lumley yelled. Everything okay? He pulled open the driver's side door and leaned in. Everything? He froze to a dead stop. The wind ripped the heavy door right out of his hand and pushed it all the way open. Holy God, Booth, Tuki said, just below the scream of the wind. I think it has happened again. Lumley turned back toward us. His face was scared and bewildered, his eyes wide. All of a sudden, he lunged toward us through snow, slipping and almost falling. He brushed me away like I was nothing and grabbed Tuki. How did you know? He roared. Where are they? What the hell is going on here? Tuki broke his grip and shoved past him. He and I looked into the Mercedes together. Warm as toast it was, but it wasn't going to be for much longer. The little amber low fuel light was glowing. The big car was empty. There was a child's Barbie doll on the passenger's floor mat, and a child's ski parka was crumpled over the seat back. Tuki put his hands over his face. And then he was gone. Lumley had grabbed him and shoved him right back into the snowbank. His face was pale and wild. His mouth was working as if he had chewed down on some bitter stuff he couldn't yet unpucker enough to spit out. He reached in and grabbed the parka. Francie's coat? He kind of whispered, and then loud, bellowing, Francie's coat! He turned around, holding it in front of him by the little fur-trimmed hood. He looked at me, blank and unbelieving. She can't be out without her coat on, Mr. Booth. Why? Why she'll freeze to death? Mr. Lumley, he blundered past me, still holding the parka, shouting, Francie! Jenny! Where are you? Where are you? I gave Tuki my hand and pulled him onto his feet. Are you all? Never mind me, he says. We have got to get hold of him both. We went after him as fast as we could, which wasn't very fast with the snow with the snow hip deep in some places. But when he stopped and we caught up to him, Mr. Lumley, Tuki started, laying a hand on his shoulder. This way, Lumley said. This is the way they went, look. We looked down. We were in a kind of dip here, and most of the wind went right over our heads. And you could see two sets of tracks, one large and one small, just filling up the snow. If we had been 5 minutes later, they would have been gone. He started to walk away, his head down, and Tuki grabbed him back. No, no, Lumley. Lumley turned his wild face up to Tuki's and made a fist. He drew it back, but something in Tuki's face made him falter. He looked from Tuki to me and then back again. She'll freeze, he said, as if we were a couple of stupid kids. Don't you get it? She doesn't have a jacket on and she's only 7 years old. They could be anywhere, Tuki said. You can't follow these tracks. They'll be gone in the next drift. What do you suggest? Lumley yells, his voice high and hysterical. If we go back to get the police, she'll freeze to death. Francie and my wife. They may be frozen already, Tuki said. His eyes caught Lumley's. Frozen or something worse. What do you mean? Lumley whispered. Get it straight, God damn it. Tell me. Mr. Lumley, Tuki says. There's something in the lot. But I was the one who came out with it finally. Said the word I never expected to say. Vampires, Mr. Lumley. Jerusalem's lot is full of vampires. I expect that is hard for you to swallow. He was staring at me as if I had gone green. Loonies, he whispers. You're a couple of loonies. Then he turned away and cupped his hands around his mouth and bellowed, Francie! Jenny! He started floundering off again. The snow was up to the hem of his fancy coat. I looked at Tuki. What do we do now? Follow him, Tuki says. His hair was plastered with snow, and he did look a little bit loony. I can't just leave him out here, Booth, can you? No, I say, guess not. So we started to wade through the snow after Lumley as best we could. But he kept getting further and further ahead. He had his youth to spend, you see. He was breaking the trail, going through the snow like a bull. My arthritis began to bother me something terrible, and I started to look down at my legs, telling myself, a little further, just a little further. Keep going, damn it, keep going. I piled it right into Tuki, who was standing spread legged in a drift. His head was hanging, and both of his hands were pressed to his chest. Tuki, I say, you okay? I'm all right, he said, taking his hands away. We'll stick with him, Booth, and when he fags out, he'll see reason. We topped a rise, and there was Lumley at the bottom, looking desperately for more tracks. Poor man. There wasn't a chance he was going to find them. The wind blew straight across down where he was, and any tracks would have been rubbed out 3 minutes after that day was made, let alone a couple of hours. He raised his head and screamed into the night, Francie! Janie, for God's sake! And you could hear the desperation in his voice, the terror, and the pity, and pity him for it. The only answer he got was the freight train wail of the wind. It almost seemed to be laughing at him, saying, I took them, Mr. New Jersey, with your fancy car and camel's hair topcoat. I took them and rubbed out their tracks, and by morning I'll have them just as neat and frozen as two strawberries in a deep freeze. Lumley, Tuki bawled over the wind. Listen, you never mind vampires or boogies or nothing like that. But you mind this. You're just making it worse for them. We got to get the and then there was an answer. A voice coming out of the dark like little tinkling silver bells. And my heart turned cold as ice in a cistern. Jerry, Jerry, is that you? Lumley wheeled at the sound, and then she came, drifting out of the dark, drifting out of the dark shadows of a little copse of trees like a ghost. She was a city woman, all right. And right then, she seemed like the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. I felt like I wanted to go to her and tell her how glad I was she was safe after all. She was wearing a heavy green pullover sort of thing, like a poncho, I believe they are called. It floated all around her, and her dark hair streamed out in the wild like. Uh, sorry. And her dark hair streamed out in the wild wind like water in a December creek, just before the winter freeze stills it and locks it in. Maybe I did take a step towards her, because I felt Tuki's hand on my shoulder, rough and warm, and still, how can I say it? I yearned after her, so dark and beautiful with that green poncho floating around her neck and shoulders, as exotic and strange as to make you think of some beautiful woman from a Walter de la Mare poem. Janie? Lumley cried. Janie! He began to struggle through the snow towards her, his arms outstretched. No! Tuki cried. No, Lumley! He never even looked, but she did. She looked up at us and grinned, and when she did, I felt my longing, my yearning, turn to horror, as cold as the grave, as white and silent as bones in a shroud. Even from the rise, we could see the sullen red glare in those eyes. They were less human than a wolf's eyes. And when she grinned, you could see how long her teeth had become. She wasn't human anymore. She was a dead thing, somehow come back to life in this black howling storm. Tuki made the sign of a cross at her. She flinched back and then grinned at us. We were too far away and maybe too scared. Stop it, I whispered. Can't we stop it? Too late, Booth, Tuki says grimly. Lumley had reached her. He looked like a ghost himself, coated in snow like he was. He reached for her, and then he began to scream. I'll hear that sound in my dreams, that man screaming like a child in a nightmare. He tried to back away from her, but her arms, long and bare and as white as the snow, snaked out and pulled him to her. I could see her cock her head and then thrust it forward. Booth, Tuki said hoarsely, we've got to get out of here. And so we ran like rats. I suppose some would say, but those who would were not there at night. We fled back down along our trail, falling down, getting up again, slipping and sliding. I kept looking back over my shoulder to see if that woman was coming after us, grinning that grin and watching us with those red eyes. We got back to the scout and Tuki doubled over, holding his chest. Tuki, I said, badly scared. What? Tigger, he said. Been bad for 5 years or more. Get me around in shotgun seat, Booth, and then get us the hell out of here. He looked an arm under his coat. He hooked an arm under his coat and dragged him around and somehow boosted him up and in. He leaned in, he leaned his head back and shut his eyes. His skin was waxy looking and yellow. I went back around the hood of the truck at a trot and I damn near ran into the little girl. She was just standing there beside the driver's side, her pick, her hair in pigtails, wearing nothing but a little bit of a yellow dress. Mister, she said in a high, clear voice, as sweet as morning mist. Won't you help me find my mother? She's gone and I'm so cold. Honey, I said, honey, you better get in the truck, your mother's. I broke off. And if there was ever a time in my life I was close to swooning, that was the moment. She was standing there, you see, but she was standing on top of the snow and there were no tracks, not in any direction. She looked up at me then, Lumley's daughter, Francie. She was no more than 7 years old and she was going to be seven for an eternity of nights. Her little face was ghastly corpse white, her eyes red and silver that you could fall into, and below her jaw I could see two small punctures, like pinpricks, their edges horribly mangled. She held out her arms at me and smiled. Pick me up, mister, she said softly. I want to give you a kiss. Then you can take me to my mommy. I didn't want to, but there was nothing I could do. I was leaning forward, my arms outstretched. I could see her mouth opening, and I could see the little fangs inside the pink ring of her lips. Something slipped down her chin, bright and silvery, and with a dim, distant, faraway horror. I realized she was drooling. Her small hands clasped themselves around my neck, and I was thinking, well, maybe it won't be so bad. Not so bad. Maybe it won't be so awful after a while. When something black flew out of the scout and struck her on the chest. She was a puff of there was a puff of strange smelling smoke, a flashing glow that was gone an instant later, and then she was backing away, hissing. Her face was twisted into a vulpine mask of rage, hate, and pain. She turned sideways, and then she was gone. One moment she was there, and the next there was a twisting knot of snow that looked a little bit like a human shape. Then that wind tattered it away across the field. Booth, Doogie whispered, be quick now. And I was. But not so quick that I didn't have time to pick up what he had thrown at that little girl from hell. His mother's Douay Bible. That was some time ago. I'm a sight older now. There was no chicken then. Herb Tooclander passed on 2 years ago. He went peaceful in the night. The bar is still there. Some man and his wife from Waterville bought it. Nice people, and they have kept it pretty much the same. But I don't go by much. It's different somehow with Dookie gone. Things in the lot go on pretty much as they always have. The sheriff found out fellow Lumley's car the next day, out of gas, the battery dead. Neither Tookie nor I said anything about it. What would have been the point? And every now and then a hitchhiker or a camper will disappear around here someplace, up on Schoolyard Hill or out near the Harmony Hill Cemetery. They'll turn up the fellow's packsack or a paperback book, all swollen and bleached out by the rain or snow or some such. But never the people. I still have bad dreams about that stormy night we went out there. Not about the woman so much as the little girl. And the way she smiled when she held her arms up so I could pick her up, so she could give me a kiss. But I'm an old man, and the time comes soon when dreams are done. You may have an occasion to be traveling in southern Maine yourself one of these days. Pretty part of the countryside. You may even stop by Tookie's bar for a drink. Nice place. They kept the name just the same. So have your drink, and then my advice to you is to keep right on moving north. Whatever you do, don't go up that road to Jerusalem slot, especially not after dark. There's a little girl somewhere out there, and I think she's still waiting for her goodnight kiss. And that's where the story ends. I hope you all liked it. And yeah, now as I mentioned, the thing with such stories is, that they tend to lose the flavor. They tend to miss out on the inherent nature of such flair, such concepts, such entities, such creatures. But Stephen King has brilliantly put forward this little conclusion to his vampire saga. Well, vampires appear here and there in his Dark Tower series, but they are more like, the muscles of the brawn of the gang rather than being the brain. He's a legend, absolutely, absolutely. He's a legend. And the way he ends the story, that, if you are here, stop at Tuki's bar, roam the countryside, but don't go to the road that leads to Jerusalem slot, especially not after dark, right? And the end, that there's a little girl somewhere out there, and I think she's still waiting for a good night kiss. And I was just imagining that Lumley, his desperation, little girl will get COVID someday. She's a vampire now. And I could understand Lumley's desperation to look for his family. He was a good, I'm pretty sure he was a good man, a good husband, a good father, probably as well. I mean, he died, right? I mean, death would have been better. He must have been turned into something. But yeah, by the way, in Stephen King's mythos, there are three kind of vampires: type 1, type 2, and type 3. So type 1 vampires are the master vampires. They are super strong, have a lot of hypnotic abilities and all. Then there are the type 2s, which are turned by the master most of the time. So Lumley's wife and daughter, they must be type 2 kind of vampires. Type 3 vampires cannot spread vampirism, but they can spread, communicable diseases like terminal diseases like HIV and all. So yeah, one for the road, a beautiful story, beautiful concept. Doesn't pretend to be anything else but a good old vampire story. So before going to any other topic, I would like to ask you guys. I'm pretty sure all of you have had your fair amount of experience of road traveling, right? Be it night. Sometimes you have traveled by the road at night. Okay. Sometimes you might have traveled. Most of the times you might have traveled under the broad daylight. So, do you have any incident with sort of, added some excitement to your goosebumps? And what do you guys think? Does anyone, of course, I'm pretty sure you guys didn't see a vampire, but anything scary you guys came across, anything spooky or maybe out of the order, anything that didn't look very, I don't know, normal? Anyone? You can use the chat box, or people are scary more than ghosts and vampires. Well, definitely, definitely. In a world like ours, people are scarier. That is definitely there. But Celine, there is something, as you mentioned, like Stephen King is a legend, right? Uh, you were not there during the Salem slot sessions, and the way the vampires started infecting people, that was really creepy. It was not like, like they show in movie vampires are attacking a crowd, a bunch of vampires. It was not like that. It was a small town. It went to bed early at night, right? And like they will start hunting, one at a time. One vampire will go out, scratch their loved one's window, and of course, I mean, they have their hypnotic ability. And then, I mean, trauma can make people do things that we cannot imagine, right? So like a child, the first victim of the vampires in the lot is a child. And when he starts scratching at the window of his mother's room, she actually loses two children, right? So she is mentally totally unstable. She has lost two children, and when she sees her little boy under the pale moonlight floating outside at the window, she doesn't question anything, she doesn't judge anything. She opens the window and she welcomes him, because she is looking for him. It doesn't matter if he has been turned into a vampire, but down the line, he bites her. And the thing about these vampires is that, they are very smart. They won't kill you at once, they'll nibble at you for a few nights, and then you'll turn. So, Salem's Lot has a beautiful storyline. Vampires are an element of it, and the best part of Salem's Lot is the fact that, and it is not just Salem's Lot. It is Stephen King horror books in general. Is the fact that the characters and the situation, the whole system, takes itself seriously. It's not like the modern day horror stories or horror movies, where they will be talking and joking about things, and a vampire is just a scary monster, and they will be anyway giving a fight to it and everything, punching the monster. But Stephen King doesn't do that. He realizes, as I mentioned, that the fear of such creatures has been engineered in us hereditarily. And as I mentioned, that from the caveman era, we used to gather around the fire to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe from the things out in the dark, right? From that point till today, uh, you know the fear of the unknown is engineered in us, and Stephen King exploits that. In his story, the first man who deals with a vampire, he gets a cardiac arrest, right? Because we are regular people. And just for an example, if you see someone outside of your window, and if you are living on the second floor or the first floor or the second floor, not at least on the ground floor, that would be crazy, right? And a sight like that might give you some shock. So the story takes itself seriously. It's not like a person sees a vampire and they're like, yeah, I'll fight it, throw holy water at it or something. So yeah, that is there. The story takes itself seriously, and I think this is one of the best attempts at a vampire story. Not just an attempt, I mean a full-fledged great story, apart from Salem's Lot, from the contemporary era, at least from the 90s, like this modern era. So yeah, guys, um, I would like to ask this question, and we have discussed it in one way or the other, especially when we were reading Carmilla. uh, that was a great book as well, a classic that outdates Dracula in terms of a full-fledged vampire novella. So, my question to you guys, and you guys can use the chat box or turn on the mic. My question is, what fascinates us about such creatures? And I'm specifically talking about such creatures of the night. Like, what is our collective fascination? The movies, the merchandise, the books, the comic books, the manga. What is so fascinating about something that can definitely kill us, or worse, turn us into something totally inhuman? What do you guys think? I would like to know your point of view. We have a lot of new people. Oh, Puneet is here. Hello, Puneet. A lot of new
Uh,
people.
I
Hello, bro. Thank you for joining. Puneet, you are a Delhi boy, a city boy. But what do you think? What is the thing that drives our fascination about such creatures कि हम उनके बारे में लिखते हैं, उनके बारे में movies बनाते हैं? What do you think is so fascinating about creatures of the night? Vampires and everything.
maybe we have not experienced it that much, so it's always an imagination. And once we are like imagining things, you can imagine it in like a million ways. There is no restriction on that.
Right, right,
They
right.
do exist or they do not exist. I don't fall into any category of thinking in that way. I respect that if they are there, whatever may be the case. But since most of the people they have not seen, so and if you are really creative and imaginative, which I am not, so if you are, so then it's very easy to uh, create a storyline out of that.
Right, right. That is indeed a good, that is indeed a good statement. Imagination knows no bound, and people are often seen, like every century has seen people play around with their imagination. Sometimes it is good, sometimes maybe one could stop, but yeah, definitely. Mosam is saying most fascinating things about them is our curiosity to know whether they exist or not. Something that Puneet also said. So, Mosam and Puneet are agreeing on the same thing. We have vampires or other creatures in our imagination, but we haven't seen them in real life. So, I think this is probably it probably stems out of the imagination. I mean, the stems out of curiosity. But then again, guys, that is why I mentioned that there are so many myths, there are so many folklores about different creatures of the night. Vampires are not the only one. But why is the vampiric creature, I mean, from any subset of any mythology, why is a vampiric creature dominating all the subcultures of any sort of pop culture? As I mentioned, be it a book, be it a movie, be it a manga, be it a graphic novel, anything. What is it about vampires that drives us so much towards them? I remember this line from a song called Heart Shaped Box by Kurt Cobain, well, Nirvana. And the line is like, genius me. I forgot. Some magnet tar pit trap he talks about. So it is like that. Like it is like a trap. It is like a magnetic attraction. Anu is saying vampires are humanized a lot. I don't know why. Exactly. Exactly. Anu, like after you mentioned this, I remember something that Abhishek Bhaiya said, that the main, like according to him, one of the main attracting quality about this lore of vampiric creatures or your standard vampires is the fact that they are, I think they are creatures who are born out of tragedy and their life is a dilemma. On one hand, uh, they are technically, they cannot perish, right? I won't say immortal. The term immortal is very, very vague. But they technically they can perish, but not on their own. Age is something that is not going to, like, they cannot wither. They can perish, but they cannot wither. So I think that is something that makes them a tragic entity. And of course, the fact that they cannot experience the sun. And here, as the author says, and the narrator Booth mentions that she was 7 years old and she is going to be seven for an eternity of nights. And that is such a beautiful yet scary line, right? She's going to be seven for an eternity of nights. So that is the thing. I think, it is like a vampire's story. Partly is a tragedy, a creature of the night that succumbs to its most primal need, the thirst for blood, right? Hunger is one of our primal needs. Hunger is probably the primal need for any creature to survive, right? And this creature is doing the same thing. I mean, why else would they be scary if they did not suck on blood? Do you, okay, there's this concept of energy vampires who tend to suck on your energy, like, they sort of drain you, right? But that doesn't sound so scary to me, right? Okay, fine, suck out some energy out of me. But sucking the blood. I think it has got something about the fact that, something related to the fact that they suck blood. Because blood, and then again, I could be coming from a place where subconsciously I might have read something long back and I'm coming from there. I don't know. But, I feel blood sustains life, right? There is something about blood that makes us possessive about it without even knowing. And for a lack of a better word, I feel that, somehow there's a weird voyeurish instinct in us, which probably can end up us enjoying the fact that, there's a creature which sucks on our blood, right? I don't know. I know the perfect word to use for it, but I don't think that would be a nice word while the recording is going on. I will definitely talk about it once we wrap up the session tonight. But I think it comes from there. And there's another thing that I feel sort of uh, could be responsible for this fascination of ours regarding such monsters. See, guys, I don't know how many of you would agree, but I feel that all of us, in one way or the other, might like to peel off dry skin. Either you would like to peel off dry skin, or you would like to pop your knuckles and your joints, or you would like to pop pimples and zits, or you would like to see you know operation like small surgery videos which are up on the YouTube, or you would probably watch those blackhead removal things on YouTube, right? You know why I'm saying this? There's something about there's something therapeutic about these videos, right? The chiropractor videos and all these videos. And maybe, just maybe, this fascination or this voyeurism of, getting to learn or read about a creature which prowls the night, making it mysterious, making it, sort of make it like it sort of makes it an entity from the domain of unknown. And maybe this blood factor attracts us just like we are attracted to blackhead removal and dry skin removal. Mawsam is saying that vampires are humanized a lot. The main reason is human. They are results of our imagination. Main reason is human. They are results of our imagination. We know our capabilities. We have the best intelligence in this world. So we think that only human has conscious mind and enough capability to hold these supernatural powers. Okay, I see where you're coming from. I see. I'm not sure if I agree to it fully, but I can definitely see your perspective. That is indeed a novel perspective. Shujal is saying that exactly. We ourselves are attracted towards blood, gore, or just see those go. Absolutely, absolutely. So you see where I'm coming from, right? So I remember a few days back, Bhadra had told us a story about these creatures from from Kerala, from Malayali folklore. I'm really sorry if I should call it folklore of Kerala or Malayali folklore. I think Malayali folklore is fine. Anu, do correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So she was talking about these creatures called Odians who are shapeshifters, who turn into animals. Some of them are good, but some have cannibalistic nature and they turn into animals. And in small villages, they'll wait for you in the shrubs and the trees around because Kerala is a green place, right? And this place will be the villages will be covered with a lot of green foliage, and they will be waiting there at night. And when people are going out for a smoke, or probably a few people have their washroom outside, or maybe just a evening stroll, they would pounce out of those shrubs and they would eat them. They drag them away and eat them. And the fact that sucking blood out of a body or eating a body. I think these are the qualities of creatures that attract us most. We are scared of ghosts, but we are not fascinated by ghosts. We are fascinated by werewolves. We are fascinated by the vampires. I think there are many elements to it, many variables. The old castle on the hill, or the old house by that sharp ledge near the roaring ocean where a man lives, and people have said that sometimes at night he leaves his house, and on full moon night they have seen a big wolf prowling around that particular building. And I think these are the things that add to the beauty: the big house, the lonely castle, the snowy hill, the dark clouds, the full moon night, and the roaring ocean. Because ghosts and all are fine, but there are creatures who probably live a purposeless life. Their only purpose is being driven by nature, by their primal instinct. Mosam is saying that Bhadra is one of them. Shujal is saying here in Tulunadu, uh, people believe the dead Brahmins eat you alive if you go to their empty house at night. Ooh, okay, that is interesting. Shujal, would you like to elaborate on it a little bit before we wrap it up, if that is convenient for you?
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
This one I heard from my grandmother. She near our grandmother's house there's a government school, and near that there's a Brahmin's house which is empty now. And when a few children would go to play uh, to the go to play near the house, the adults would scold, don't go near there. Uh, they call that dead Brahman Brahm Rakshas, I guess. And they say it will eat you up.
Right, right. The myth of the Brahma Rakshas. Indeed, indeed. I actually didn't know that. I mean, of course, why am I shocked? Brahma Rakshas is one of the pan India mythological creatures. It is, the folk, like there are lores and myths about this particular entity throughout the country. So yeah, but this is probably the first time when I've heard of Brahm Rakshas trying to, like heard of Brahm Rakshas's fascination for human flesh. Celine is saying, I feel we humans relate to them in some ways because of their isolation. Exactly. That is such a good point, Celine. They see the world change, but they remain the same. Absolutely. Them running for blood for their survival. So are we chasing. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel in a very crooked and twisted sense of justice. I think that if you compare the killer instincts of a human being with the vampires, you would see that they hunt and they kill in some like some renditions and editions do show vampires as heartless, cold, murdering creatures. But going by the lore, these creatures are actually fueled by their hunger or their thirst, right? But then again, they are dead. They shouldn't, if they don't have a beating heart, they shouldn't be hungry or thirsty. And I think that makes it like, and then from here, the thing turns into a case of occult and sort of theology. it comes to the domain of good versus evil, and how a dead thing which doesn't have a heartbeat is not supposed to have desires, not only hunger but carnal desires and all those things. We can definitely talk about it for nights, just like the little girl what was her name, Francie or something. Yes, just like 7-year-old little Francie, who is going to be 7-year old for an eternity of nights. We can definitely have such discussions for an eternity of nights as well. मौसम इज सेइंग क्रीचर 3D में जो कॉन्सेप्ट है वो सबसे ज्यादा फेमस, मैंने देखा नहीं एक्चुअली क्रीचर 3D। उसमें तो पता नहीं वो कैसा वॉलरस जैसा था। आई थिंक द ओनली scary thing in that movie was Bipasha Basu's acting, but Celine is saying, I don't know, whenever people ask me not to go there because there's a supernatural power or something, I just feel there are some goons doing immoral activities. So, exactly, don't go. Exactly, absolutely. Like Puneet said, है कि नहीं पता नहीं, है तो ठीक है, नहीं है तो भी ठीक है, मुझे कोई मतलब नहीं है. I'm not indulging myself. रोहित इज सेइंग पीपल का ट्री कट करने पे ब्रह्म राक्षस बनते हैं। ओह ओके, अपनी दादी से कट करवाऊंगा मैं। बुआ तो खुद से ही है। पीपल ट्री आल्सो सिंबलाइजेस विष्णु भगवान। ओके ओके, not to cut some trees has a scientific tint to it. These trees give oxygen 24 hours. I think trees give oxygen 24 hours, right? All the trees? Do correct me if I'm wrong. They don't? Not all. Okay. Like from what I know, all the trees do it. At night, CO2. It's not just CO2, right? Do enlighten me, guys. It's not like at night they are shutting off oxygen and just giving CO2. That is not the case.
यहाँ पे ना एक कॉन्सेप्ट लोगों के दिमाग में बहुत गलत हो चुका है अभी तक भी।
Hmm.
सारे ट्रीज रात को कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड नहीं देते हैं, कुछ ऑक्सीजन भी देते हैं।
Hmm.
और लोगों के कॉन्सेप्ट में भी आता है कि जो ट्रीज है वो CO2 ब्रेथ करते हैं, जो कि गलत है। वो ऑक्सीजन ही ब्रेथ करते हैं।
Hmm.
CO2 तो बस एक क्या कहते हैं जो वो कार्बोहाइड्रेट जब बनाते हैं
Byproduct.
ना उस।
Byproduct.
हाँ हाँ, वो बाई प्रोडक्ट है, तो वो रात को भी होता है। अगर किसी किसी ट्री में बन रहा हो, वो फोटोसिंथेसिस हो रहा हो, तो वो
Hmm.
रात में भी निकलेगा। और वो सारे पेड़ों में नहीं होता, लेकिन बहुत सारे में होता है। तो जिसमें नहीं होगा वहां पे CO2 निकलेगा,
Hmm.
और जिसमें होता है वहां पे ऑक्सीजन निकलेगा। तो ये कम्प्लीटली ट्रू नहीं है कि रात में सारे CO2 ही देते हैं।
Oh, okay. That is interesting. I guess I need to brush up my biology a little bit more. But nevertheless, guys, it was an amazing session. A hush hush, lightly nudging session. So we'll be wrapping up now, and I hope you have a good night's sleep. So sleep tight, guys. Be careful. The heat wave doesn't forgive anyone. Yeah, I mean, I know about this don't sleep under big trees thing. I mean, of course, I have heard this CO2 thing. I'm not sure. I was just not sure how true that is. Right. So that is the thing. You too, buddy. Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. Don't let the vampires bite. Absolutely, guys. Don't let the vampires bite. And if you hear this little scratch at your window and your long dead grandma or a long dead best friend is asking you to let them in, don't. Okay? Just don't.